Hi, I'm Taylor with Mom on the Spectrum, and today we're talking about a topic that keeps coming up in our community groups, and that is the importance of connection to our bodies. When we are connected to our bodies, we're able to be more present, we're able to better regulate our sensory experiences. There are so many important implications for connecting to our bodies, especially when it comes to life as an autistic adult. We will be talking about trauma and abuse, so trigger warning for those of you who might not be comfortable with this subject matter right now. Please do what you need to do in order to take care of yourself. And remember, I'm not a licensed medical professional. I am an autistic mom sharing my experiences and personal research with you in hopes that you can connect and better understand your own challenges. We're also going to be covering the 4 trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fawn has been a light bulb moment for many of you in the community, again in our groups, kind of realizing that there's this 4th trauma response that explains a whole lot of our experiences. So if you're ready to delve into that with me, let's get started. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Please subscribe so you can stay up to date with the latest videos and resources that I put out for our community. You're joining us for a bit of a heavier topic, but it's an important one. At the end of the video, I'll tell you how to get plugged into an autistic community group if that sounds like something that might be helpful to you. The main reason I wanted to cover this subject today is because it is extremely important to the autistic community to understand how to connect to our bodies. And as I connect to the autistic community day in and day out, I'm finding these themes and patterns that are connecting us. So generally speaking, I'm finding that many of us on the spectrum are people pleasers and also highly empathic. As someone on the spectrum who has social differences, I can constantly be thinking about what other people are doing and try to copy and paste their behaviors. So if somebody's laughing at a certain joke, even though I don't understand it, I'm gonna laugh at the joke. If somebody's standing a certain way with a certain posture, I might copy that posture to try to blend in better because I feel really out of place. In doing these types of things, I'm focusing more on what other people are doing, what other people's experiences are, and less on mine. Also, in an attempt to blend in socially, I'm often thinking about what other people are wanting and needing and attending to their needs before my own. This definitely leads to people pleasing, where I try to make other people happy, a lot of times at my own expense. Yes, other people do this who aren't on the spectrum, but it's a different level of intensity. And this is one of those things where if you know, right? As I talk to more autistic people, it's like, yeah, you can't explain this to allistic, non-autistic people. It's different. And along with the people pleasing comes this empathy, where we're aware of what other people are feeling and needing and wanting. And one person on the channel described it as being an antenna. Like every time they walk in the room, they feel like they're an antenna that's picking up all of the wavelengths of everybody in the room. And that comes at the expense of shutting down our own body's feedback, and we'll get to that in a second. So how does trauma play into this? Unfortunately, because of our social differences as autistic people, many times this can lead to us being taken advantage of in social situations because we might not quite have a grasp on what's actually happening. Also, as autistic people, our nervous system is somewhat more heightened. We might feel like we're always on high alert. We're always, again, that antenna, taking in information from our surroundings. We're always aware of what we're hearing, smelling, seeing, touching, tasting, feeling, everything. We're taking it in all of the time. And because of that, because of our higher level of intake, there's a higher number of opportunities where we can get overwhelmed and experience a traumatic event. So let's define trauma. This is kind of a buzzword these days. I was really intrigued by some of the definitions I found. I'm going to share 2 with you. The first one is from the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, and I will post a link to all of these resources in the description. Trauma is the lasting emotional response that often results from living through a distressing event. Experiencing a traumatic event can harm a person's sense of safety, sense of self, and ability to regulate emotions and navigate relationships. Long after the traumatic event occurs, people with trauma can often feel shame, helplessness, powerlessness, and intense fear. This is a definition from the American Psychological Association. Trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident or natural disaster. There are other things listed in there, but for the sake of not triggering anyone, I'm just going to keep the list at that. But what was super interesting to me about both these definitions, trauma is an emotional response. They both say this. It's not the actual event, it's the response to the event. Let that sink in for a second. It's not the actual event, it's the response to the event. This is super interesting because I think for me, for a long time, I was like really hesitant to use the word trauma because that seems, oh my gosh, like that's such a big word. But trauma is the way we perceive an event. Like the same event can happen to 2 different people and there can be 2 different responses to it. So one person might program it as trauma, and the other person might program it as a stressful event that they were able to quickly cope with and recover from. So the difference here is that trauma is this lasting response, right? And if you've experienced trauma, you know this. Somehow it lives in your body. It lives on even when you feel like that event is well in the past. So what happens when we experience this trauma? There are 4 trauma stress responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Now, fawn has been a really interesting one to bring up in community groups because this has been a big light bulb for many of you. Some of you had no idea that this was a stress response, and it's actually one that's been added to the list pretty recently. So most of us are familiar with fight or flight. So in a stressful situation, you might be inclined to completely flee, to run away and not deal with it. You might be inclined to fight it, to become aggressive and to want to tackle it head on. You might freeze and be unable to make decisions and just kind of go blank. Fawning, let me read you the definition of this. I really appreciate this definition I found from a website called Charlie Health. Fawning is a trauma response where a person develops people-pleasing behaviors to avoid conflict and to establish a sense of safety. In other words, the fawn trauma response is a type of coping mechanism that survivors of complex trauma adopt to appease their abusers. Let that sink in for a second at your own pace. I mean, if you need to pause the video here, please do so. Don't keep going if you're having these emotional responses right now. This can be a really big light bulb moment, like I said, for many of you. So fawning is a stress response. It's a traumatic response. It's you trying to find safety in the situation in any way possible. So even if you're experiencing abuse, discomfort, trauma, you act like you're okay. So at the time, it might keep you safe. That's why we do it. At the time, it keeps you safe. It might keep you safe from an abuser who you need to protect yourself from. But that trauma response lives in our body. But until we process that experience in a healthy way, we're going to continue to have lingering effects of that traumatic experience. And processing these things, let's talk about this. It can be a lifelong process. I do believe that as we process and heal and regulate, that those traumatic responses become much less intense over time. But I don't want anybody to think I'm saying there's this magic wand that you can just wave, I'm regulated now. It's usually a long-term process that requires a lot of self-compassion and self-care and support from other people. That's a big key to healing as well. Okay, so what happens whenever we engage in one of these 4 trauma responses? We disconnect from our bodies. Because we can't process what is happening, we shut off the feedback that our body is giving us. Many of you, myself included, have been labeled sensitive your whole life. And this can oftentimes be said in a negative light. Oh, you're so sensitive, right? Well, I want to flip that on its head and say, first of all, it is okay to be sensitive. It's actually a very helpful evolutionary skill. Being sensitive to your environment, to threats in your environment, is incredibly helpful and adaptive. It is okay to lean on that sense of sensitivity and trust it. But what's happened is that many of us have lost trust in our sensitivity, and we've pushed it down, we've suppressed it, and we've said, no, nothing's wrong. I can just fawn my way out of this. I can pretend like everything's fine. Masking, right? Fawning and masking, I think, go hand in hand a lot of times. So there's this incredible price that we pay to live out these stress responses. It means shutting off our body, shutting off the signals that our body is giving us, and we lose that trust in ourselves, which is very damaging. It's very hard to go through life when you've lost trust in your ability to respond to your body's internal cues that are accurate and helpful. When we have these stress responses, we're not in the present moment. We are fast forwarded into the future, worried about what is going to happen, or we are thinking about the past, thinking about something we should have done differently, could have done differently. We're not in the present moment actually taking in what is happening. We've put the blinders on. But being in the present is incredibly necessary for healing. Recognizing that you're safe in this moment, being able to take in the feedback that your body is giving you and process it in a healthy way rather than suppressing it. If you're interested in learning more about these concepts, you can read a book called The Body Keeps the Score. I will put the link in the description. It's fantastic. Very hard to read through because it's all about trauma, just FYI, but very helpful. So when it comes to healing from these traumatic experiences, because as you know, if you're a trauma survivor or have experienced abuse in your life, there's remnants of those experiences, like you can feel them. You feel the weight of those things in your body. And as terrifying as it can be, huge caveat here, you have to do this in your own time and with the help of other people. Don't try to go processing all of this packaged trauma by yourself because it can have a large effect and you want to make sure you're supported. But in time, when you're ready, it's important to start feeling the effects of these things in your body. And that's where we come to the importance of embodiment. Embodiment is just the practice of finding a peace in your body, feeling at home in your body. This can take a very long time to do. It takes a lot of practice, especially if you're used to suppressing feedback that your body is giving you. So as you learn that you're safe in your body and that you can attend to the feedback it's giving you, this healing process starts taking place. And it's hard to put your finger on, it's hard to point to and say this is happening, but there's this overall feeling of safety and wholeness that you start to uncover as you embrace the feeling of being with your body. So how do we do that? How do we become more embodied? Anything you can do to be more in this present moment will help you become more embodied. So taking in things through your senses, really focusing, what am I hearing? What am I seeing? What am I smelling? What does this taste like? How does this feel in my skin? And sitting with that sensation and exploring it, being curious, asking questions. If you're prone to panic attacks, one way that you can become instantly more present is to put an ice cube on the back of your neck. Then you're immediately thinking about, oh, this is so cold, this is so cold. You're in the present moment, right? We also talk about this in community groups with unmasking. When you're in a situation talking to someone, how is your body responding? Are you clenched up and hunched forward? Are you more relaxed? Do you have like a feeling of grounding? Oftentimes this will come like in your pelvis and you feel like there's more of a weight there that's kind of holding you down to the earth in like a really relaxed way. Whenever you feel that openness and sense of grounding, that's an indication that you are actually in the present moment, that you're able to experience the feedback that your body is giving you. When you're more clenched, hunched over, I've even noticed that my voice will go higher when I'm fawning and everything's fine. You'll start to notice these cues as you become more self-aware and mindful. You'll start to notice these coping mechanisms that you've adapted over time to keep you safe. And it's important when you recognize them just to be compassionate with yourself, be mindful, acknowledge, oh, maybe that's a coping mechanism, and get curious about why it's there. And whenever things feel like too much to bear, make sure that you're reaching out for a friend, for support, for therapy, for a medical or mental health professional that can help you process through these things, because it's not something that you want to do on your own. It can definitely open up a bag of worms when you start embodying yourself, especially if this is a practice that is foreign to you. Anything that helps you become more aware of your body can be embodiment. So yoga, mindful breathing, going for a walk in nature, meditating, journaling. Really, there are opportunities for embodiment and mindfulness everywhere, in every conversation. It's not always something that you want to lean into because you're still going to experience stressful situations, and it's important sometimes to have coping strategies. For many of us, they've kept us alive, but when it feels safe, when it feels right, and you can become mindful of your response in any environment, why is my stomach clenched right now? Can I take a deep breath into that area and help it relax a little bit? That's the cool thing too about this embodiment practice. You don't necessarily have to have an understanding of what is actually happening, right? So a lot of times in talk therapy, we try to figure out the reasons behind things and the patterns, and that has a place and it's so helpful. But when you learn to embody yourself, it's almost like this magic. It's like, and I hesitate to use that term, but it's just like this natural process that unfolds where you become more connected to yourself. And again, process over time. That's part of the beauty of it, right? The journey of the process of learning how to become more at home in your body. And just when you think you've figured something out, there'll be another opportunity to practice that embodiment where you feel the pulling of cutting off, shutting down. Can you stay in the moment? Can you breathe? Can you communicate what your needs are? I'm opening up a whole field of discussion for us. But hopefully this has given you an indication of how connecting to our body can be helpful to you as an autistic person. When we're more embodied and feel more at home within ourselves, it's easier to regulate our sensory overwhelm. It's easier to understand what we want and need. It's easier to shut off the people pleasing and take care of ourselves. And obviously it's easier to be more present, which I believe is just the best gift that you can give yourself. So with all of this, add so much self-compassion, self-care, self-love. Again, build a support network around you. It might take a while. Just start with one person, if that's a therapist or a friend or a mentor. Reach out for support as you process these things. If you are looking to join a community group, this would be a great place to process some of these ideas and thoughts and experiences you may be having. You can go to momonthespectrum.life/community and check out all of the community groups that we have going right now. That list is updated regularly, so make sure to check back if there's not one that fits your schedule right now. I'll put the link to everything in the description so you can find it easily. Leave me a comment and let me know how this resonated with you. Take some time to yourself after this video. If you're feeling some stirring, some anxiety, some agitation, take some time to breathe, honestly. That would be a great way to practice what we've been talking about in this video. Breathe, connect with yourself, find self-compassion, curiosity, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.